So, consider this space. This is a wide open space, one that gives plenty of visibility for players to understand sort of all the opportunities and the dangers that are nearby. So this is known as prospect space. So this is an idea coined by the architectural theorist Grant Hildebrand, and written a lot as far as like where I came across it. Came across it from Christopher Totten, who is an architect or architecturally trained, and he writes about games. He's a great article on Gama Sutra that I've included in the lecture notes for this week, and I definitely suggest going and checking it out. He also has a book, Architectural Approach to Level Design, which, yeah, I can definitely recommend. So this is what we would call prospect space, and so the long sight lines here means that the players is exposed to lots of potential threats. There could be enemies here, and they can see us from near, from far. They could be hiding behind a tree far away, and it's really hard to detect them seeing us. There's really nowhere to hide out here, and so even when there's not really any immediate threat, these wide open spaces have a sense of loneliness and vulnerability. There's no privacy here, no comfort. It inspires what's called agoraphobia, so the fear of wide open spaces. And when we are in these sort of spaces in real life, it feels like the eyes of the world are upon us. You don't feel like you can do something that you would do in the privacy of your own bedroom, that sort of thing. Anyone could be watching you. But really, there's another side to this. Think about how you feel charging across large spaces in Shadow of the Colossus or Zelda Breath of the Wild. So prospect spaces also evoke a sense of freedom and choice. Our movement is less limited. The long sight lines allow us to understand the configuration of large volumes of spaces. There's a variety of activities that could possibly take place here, running, fighting, dodging, searching for treasure. I don't know, if there was a river here, we could fish, all sorts of stuff. So Grant Hildebrand suggests that a feeling of discomfort in these large spaces actually comes from our evolutionary survival instincts, essentially that when our ancestors needed to cross, they needed to go out from their caves to find game, to hunt, to find water and food, and they had to cross open wilderness to do that because that's where the opportunities exist. So we risked the threat of predators so that we can take advantage of the opportunities that lie out here, the opportunities that the predators use against us. So Totten describes prospect space like this one as one of three types of space for games. So the second one that he describes is called narrow space. So narrow space is a space that feels cramped, essentially. This is the other end of the spectrum. So, and the funny thing is that despite the fact that it is so different from prospect space, it's not wide open, it's so closed in on the player, it evokes a very similar feeling of discomfort. This is claustrophobia, the fear of enclosed spaces, and so in a space like this, our sight lines are greatly reduced, meaning that it's really difficult to recognize when danger might be near. It could sneak up on us. It could be right around the next corner. And not only that, but if danger actually does present itself and there's a threat, our options for escape and defense are pretty limited. The walls are keeping us from running away. It's really difficult to spot potential hiding places and potential opportunities. So, but this also has another side to it. In the right context, narrow space can feel comforting, like home. It's like our bedroom, our bathroom, our closet, places that we feel safe, womb-like. It could be, essentially, this could be a situation where it feels like you control all the variables. So I remember playing Minecraft somewhat recently, and it was the first couple days of the game, and it suddenly came to, and basically night came, and I wasn't expecting it, and so I was right next to a cliff, and what I did was just kind of burrowed into it, creating this tiny little room. I put a door on the opening and a torch inside, and I had my own little safe kind of hobbit hole. So, depending on the context, narrow spaces also can feel comforting. So, the third type of space, then, is what Totten calls intimate space. So this is the Goldilocks zone, essentially. The intimate space is space that's neither too big nor too small. It's built precisely for the metrics of your game. There is enough space to maneuver, to defend yourself, to flee, to hide. There is enough room to see potential threats from a far enough away distance, that is, to act intelligently, to act strategically. But there's not too much room that you'd have to worry about threats that are both near to you and far away. So really, you have a limited sort of space that you have to worry about. There are enough opportunities in a intimate space for you to use it as you see fit, and the threats are mitigated. Essentially, intimate space is space that gives the player control, a feeling of control over their destiny. So that's the three types of enclosure I'd like to talk about, but that's not everything about enclosure I'd like to talk about. So back in, week 3, I talked about three types of articulation of volumes, and in regard to basically the three orientation of planes that we use to create volumes, and essentially how you were sort of affected by these psychologically. So the three types of planes essentially are essentially the base plane, the plane that you stand on, the wall planes that you sort of hem you in, and the overhead planes that are essentially above you. And psychologically, we look at these as the base plane representing ourself. We're intimately associated with the planes that we walk on, and in general, we interact with them the most. We step on them, we run, touch them. Their resistance keep us from falling to the center of the earth. They're essentially what all architecture is built on. And then wall planes are society. So they are primarily used sort of to create boundaries in space. We interact with them by choice, as opposed to we're forced to interact with the base plane. They can be antagonistic, they get in our way, they limit our visibility. So that sort of thing. Wall planes are generally what define the enclosures I was talking about, as far as prospect and intimate and narrow space. But to talk about the overhead plane, which is representative of our sky plane. So while we walk on the ground plane, and sometimes we interact with, we walk on the ground plane, and sometimes we interact with wall planes, the overhead plane typically is out of reach, but its presence more than any other sort of helps to, or it sets an emotional tone. And in spaces such as, cathedrals, that sort of thing. That's what this is meant to invoke, is sort of a sense of the heavens, that they're so far up there, and you have sort of, deity's presence in with you inside of this building. And so really high ceiling planes are used in especially sacred places, or places that are desiring of respect, government buildings, the Capitol, that sort of thing. So let's see. So if we take a look at how the ceiling plane might be able to affect us in sort of this narrow space. So we've got sort of normal narrow space, high narrow space. So gameplay-wise, there's really not any difference here, but there is a difference sort of just of tone. There's a feeling of, there's a feeling of, I'm not sure exactly. It's, and there's definitely a feeling of airiness. There's a feeling of freedom in some respects, but at the same time, it's almost kind of like there's a feeling of hope here that you don't necessarily get in this with the lower. But at the same time, the gameplay space doesn't really change. So let's take a look at prospect space, for instance. So this is normal prospect space, and if we were to enclose this with a ceiling plane, here we have sort of a cave space. Now, the actual gameplay space does not change, but as you can see, having the lower plane does tend to damper the feeling of hope here. So it's definitely one way that sort of the ceiling plane sort of presses down on us and kind of removes the sense of freedom and airiness, I guess, without really changing the gameplay space. So another way we can talk about space and that can affect how it feels is in elevations. So